It is about, here at home, our national security and the security of every family in Britain. This is an alliance that is strong and united, that knows what the major challenges are and is determined to overcome them. First, there has been a clear message sent out from this conference to Russia that what President Putin is doing is indefensible and wrong. While we meet here in Newport, a package of sanctions is being finalised in Brussels that will further increase the economic cost to Russia for its behaviour. We stand firmly behind Ukraine's right to make its own decisions, not to have them dictated by Russian tanks rolling over the border. And we will continue our efforts to support Ukraine, including by providing financial assistance to improve their command, control and communication capabilities. NATO members right across Europe, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, have been reassured that this is an alliance that will meet its treaty obligations to any member that is under threat. No one will leave here in any doubt that our collective security in NATO is as strong as it's ever been. The alliance is firmly committed to providing ongoing reassurance to our eastern allies. The United Kingdom will contribute 3,500 personnel to exercises in Eastern Europe between now and the end of 2015 as part of NATO's efforts to ensure a persistent presence on our eastern flank. We've also agreed to step up NATO's ability to respond quickly to any threat with a new multinational spearhead force which is deployable anywhere in the world within 2 to 5 days. The UK will provide a battle group and a brigade headquarters, and I hope other nations will set out their plans too, backing communiqué words with concrete action. Second, NATO needs to be even stronger. Britain is one of only 4 countries that currently spends 2% of its GDP on defence, but others will now do more. With today's Wales pledge, every NATO member not spending 2% will halt any decline in defence spending, and they will aim to increase it in real terms as GDP grows and to move towards 2% within a decade. But it's not just the amount of money that matters. It is also about spending on equipment that you can actually deploy. So we've agreed that 1/5 of defence budgets should be dedicated to major new equipment. Here in Britain, we have the second largest defence budget in NATO. We have the biggest in the whole European Union. We've taken long-term, often difficult decisions to put our defence budget on a sustainable footing, and the fruits of this are now coming through. We're equipping all 3 of our services with the best and most modern military hardware that money can buy. On Wednesday, I announced a £3.5 billion contract for the Scout armoured vehicles for the Army, the largest such order in over 3 decades. The Royal Air Force is getting new fleets of Joint Strike Fighter and Voyager refuelling aircraft, as well as 22 new A400M transport aircraft, the first of which has just arrived. The Royal Navy is receiving new astute hunter-killer submarines, the Type 45 destroyers, including HMS Duncan, here in Cardiff Bay. There will also be new Type 26 frigates too. All of these decisions have been made possible by taking the difficult long-term approach that I've spoken about. And of course we have our brand new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, which was named by Her Majesty in July and has now left her dry dock and is being fitted with her combat systems. She will be the mightiest ship that the Royal Navy has ever put to sea, able to protect and project our interests across the globe for decades to come. And today I can announce that the second carrier, HMS Prince of Wales, will also be brought into service. This will ensure that we always have one carrier available 100% of the time. They are an investment in British security, in British prosperity and our place in the world, transforming our ability to project power globally, whether independently or with our allies. Now, third, we were clear at this NATO conference about the new threats that we face, principally Islamist extremism. Everyone remembers the divisions around the world over the Iraq War 10 years ago. There were no real divisions here. The NATO alliance is clear about the threat that we face, the scale of that threat, and the fact that we must use all the instruments at our disposal, humanitarian, diplomatic and military. We've agreed to offer a NATO training mission for Iraq as soon as the new Iraqi government is in place. The fight against ISIL must be led by the Iraqis themselves. But we will continue to encourage countries in the region to support this effort, and we'll continue to work with our partners on the ground to take all necessary steps to squeeze this barbaric terrorist organisation out of existence. This will take time, and it will take resolve. We will proceed carefully and methodically, drawing together the partners we need, above all in the region, to implement a comprehensive plan. Now, fourth, as our troops return home from Afghanistan, so it is right that we do all we can to support them and their families. We are the first British government to write the military covenant, the deal between Britain and her military, into the law of our land. We've doubled the operational allowance for service personnel. We've introduced free higher and further education scholarships for bereaved service children. We've invested $200 million in helping our service personnel to buy homes. We've increased the rate of council tax relief, signed up every single local council in our country in support of the military. And, of course, we've given unprecedented support to military charities. Today, we've taken this military covenant internationally, with every NATO member signing up to a new Armed Forces Declaration to honour and look after those whose work and sacrifices have delivered our peace and security over the last 65 years. And there's a commitment there for all of us to work together to ask what more we can do in future years to honour, revere and look after those who serve us and their families. So we leave Celtic Manor today, united in purpose and with a stronger NATO, better able to keep our people safe. I would like to thank everyone who's helped to make this summit possible, but most of all, I'd like to thank the people of Wales, who have welcomed the world and, I believe, done our United Kingdom and NATO proud. Thank you. Very happy to take some questions. Let's start with Faisal.
Faisal Islam, Sky News. Prime Minister, do you take the ceasefire in Ukraine seriously, the offer from Putin and the reaction to it? And are you, in essence, accepting the de facto partition of that country?
Well, first of all, let me answer the second bit of your question. We're not accepting a partition of the Ukraine. We should respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. That is why we've taken the sanctions. That is why we've piled on the pressure. And that is why you've seen such unity here in NATO today. The announcement about the ceasefire is good news. I think we need to look carefully about whether it is a ceasefire or whether it also includes a commitment, as I understand it might, to make real progress on a proper peace plan. And we need to look at the detail of that to make sure that happens. We should be clear that the sanctions that we agreed last Saturday in Brussels that would go ahead, they will go ahead, they will be put in place. But, of course, if a ceasefire and a proper peace plan is put in place, then, of course, it'll be right to look and see how those sanctions could potentially be removed if proper milestones are reached. But be in no doubt, the ceasefire, yes, good news. A peace plan would be better news, but the sanctions go ahead as announced. Nick Robinson.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Nick Robinson, BBC. You said that Ukraine should not be dictated to by Russian tanks. Isn't that precisely what's happened? Ukraine has signed a ceasefire. Putin has won because the Ukrainians realise that the West have done too little too late, and Putin will get away with his aggression.
I don't accept that. I mean, you have to remember how all this came about. The people of Ukraine have made a democratic choice to elect a new president. They made a democratic choice to have an association agreement with the European Union, and they want that choice to be respected. Putin's actions have been totally unjustified, and what we have now is, hopefully, a ceasefire, and then, obviously, some form of peace process. But in that peace process, we should be absolutely clear that we shouldn't accept the partition of Ukraine. It is one country. It is one country whose borders should be respected. And that is, I believe, what needs to happen now. And I'm confident that that is what President Poroshenko will seek to achieve. I would challenge the view that the EU, the West, America, have somehow been weak in response to what has happened. I think it's very important to focus on the pressure that we can realistically and effectively bring to bear, and that is economic sanctions pressure. At the end of the day, Russia needs Europe and America more than America and Europe need Russia. We need to make that relationship pay, and we have done. That's why the sanctions that we've introduced, The Russian economy was growing, it's now shrinking. The ruble has fallen, the stock market has fallen, banks have problems raising money, and I believe that Russia can see that the EU and the US have moved together in these things, most recently with this latest round of sanctions. And if they go on destabilising this country, partitioning this country, they know they will face more pressure. So I'm confident that we're taking the right approach. These things are never solved easily or quickly, but there is genuine resolve between America and the countries of the European Union to keep up the pressure if there isn't a fair outcome. Tom Bradley.
Prime Minister, isn't part of dealing with Islamic State, or isn't part of what you need to do, going to have to involve dealing with the situation on the ground in Syria? Can you just tell me what your thinking is on that? Are you tempted to come to some kind of new deal with President Assad, or is that permanently off the table?
Well, let's deal with the Assad issue first, and then maybe the more general question about how to deal with so-called Islamic State. My view is that President Assad is part of the cause of the problem, because it has been the brutality with which he's attacked his own people that has led some of the Sunni population, to seek solace in an extremist movement because they have been so brutalised by Assad. So being part of the problem, I find it hard to see him being part of the solution. I also think that it's very important that we act in a way that preserves our moral authority, and that we don't start doing deals on the basis that my enemy is my friend and all the rest of it. I don't think that would be the right approach. Where I think your question is absolutely right is clearly if we're going to deal with the problem of ISIL, ISIS, so-called Islamic State, we have to deal with it right across the board. As I've argued, that starts at home with stopping fighters going to fight, making sure we're secure. It involves a new Iraqi government. It also involves, I would argue, the same thing in Syria that we need in Iraq. Just as we need in Iraq a democratic, pluralistic government that can represent all of the people of that country, Sunni, Shia and Kurd, so in Syria we need a transition to a government that can represent all of the people in that country and stop brutalising them. So part of my argument is that you need that mixture of intelligent politics, diplomatic pressure, long-term engagement and a comprehensive plan, as well as the potential for military or other more aggressive action. You need all of those things in order to solve this problem, and that's going to be the case with Syria as with Iraq. Let's have a gentleman here.
James Hurst from BFBS. You've been asking other countries to pledge to go back to 2% of GDP defence spending, yet the RUSI think tank says today Britain's defence spending is on course to dip to something like 1.8% of GDP next year. Did you make any commitments to increase Britain's defence spending?
Well, we are above 2%, and we are one of only, I think I said, 4 countries. I think Estonia, Greece and Britain in the European Union, and then, of course, America. For 4 out of 28, and we have stayed above 2%, even at a time where, as Prime Minister, I inherited one of the biggest budget deficits anywhere in the world. And so I think that's important. And I think it is actually worth really looking at what the declaration says, because what's remarkable about this, there's always been the 2% pledge in NATO, but it's never been set out as clearly as this. It's never been, in my understanding, in a sort of leader's declaration. And it is very clear what's been signed up to, and it makes a differentiation. It says those who are meeting 2% should aim to continue to do so. But then it's very specific about those people who, for year after year in some cases, have not been spending at 2%. And it says allies whose current proportion of GDP spent on defence is below this level will halt any decline in defence expenditure, aim to increase defence expenditure in real terms as GDP grows, and aim to move towards the 2% guideline within a decade. That was hard fought. And when people ask, do these conferences ever actually achieve anything specific, I would argue there's a lot that's been achieved specific here. A genuine rapid reaction force, proper capability and training missions that are going to go into countries like Jordan, like Georgia, and in time Iraq. And here, a really important breakthrough in terms of getting other countries to bear the sort of burden that Britain and others have been bearing. So we will set our budgets at the time of the next election. We'll have to set out our plans. But I'm proud of the fact that even in a very difficult fiscal environment, we have effectively frozen the defence budget in cash terms, £35 billion, probably a top 5 defence budget anywhere in the world. And because we've made difficult choices, we've got the aircraft carrier, the destroyers, the frigates, the A400Ms and all the other hardware that I mentioned. And we talked about that quite a lot today. Tom Newton-Dunn.
Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun. Prime Minister, John Kerry was very forthright in some of his views on how to tackle ISIL and what was needed this morning. I just wondered if you agree with him on 3 specific areas. 1, that it could be a fight that will last up to 3 years. 2, that he would like to seek UN authorization for it as early as the end of the month at the General Meeting. And thirdly, it would take real military commitment, albeit from the air, from the core coalition partners. Are you prepared to commit to all 3, especially the military commitment?
Well, I agree with the sorts of points that he's been setting out. I mean, the issue about, the time this will take. I wouldn't put a specific time on a specific problem like so-called Islamic State. It arose very rapidly. I believe it can be squeezed and squeezed effectively. I wouldn't want to put a timescale on that. But I've said many times that this is a generational struggle. We've been fighting against Islamist extremism all around the world. And I think one of the things I try to get across at this conference is I think it's wrong to think the cause of the problem is the particular fracture in a country like Syria or like Iraq. The cause of the problem is the poisonous narrative of Islamist extremism. What happens is wherever there are fractures, civil wars, conflicts, tensions, it bubbles up to the surface. That's why you've seen it in Somalia, in Nigeria, in Mali, in Afghanistan when it was controlled by the Taliban, and now so tragically in Syria and Iraq. So, look, the struggle we are involved in is going to fighting Islamist extremism at home and abroad is a generational struggle. In terms of the UN, I think that the more the UN can say to back and support, hopefully, a new Iraqi government in its work and to condemn Islamist extremism, I think the better. In terms of military commitment, look, solving this problem has already taken military commitment. Britain has been dropping aid out of military planes. We've been flying spy plane missions over part of Iraq. We've been providing the Peshmerga with arms. Clearly, military commitment is required. And what I've said is that nothing is ruled out. We'll act in our national interest. Anything we do must be part of a comprehensive plan. We must be working with allies. We've got to help those on the ground who are involved in the fight right now. And I really would put up front and centre this need for an Iraqi government that can represent all its people. Because the heart of this problem, of course, there's a lot of the problem in Syria, but the heart of the problem is in Iraq itself. And if you ask yourself the question, who is responsible for running an Iraqi state that is not extremist, that does not back terror, that supports all its people, that is the job of the Iraqi government. So you can't overestimate how important that is as part of a comprehensive plan to deal with this problem. Yes, Andy.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andy Bell, 5 News. Is it your understanding that the 10 countries of the core coalition, as we now discover it's to be called, that they are the countries prepared to take military action? And if they are not, then what does this core coalition amount to?
Well, I think, with the danger of repeating myself, there was great unity here at this conference about what needed to be done, about the processes that need to be gone through, about making sure we're backing those on the ground, we're helping the local, the countries in the region and all the rest of it. That for Britain's part, we don't rule anything out. We'll act in our national interest. I think in terms of, the sort of decisions you're talking about, we're not at that stage yet. And I think it's very important that what we do is part of a comprehensive plan. OK, one more. Let's have... why don't we have at the back over here?
David Maddox from the Scotsman. In 2 weeks' time, Prime Minister, Scottish voters will be deciding whether to stay with the UK or leave it. How will you explain to your partners in NATO, if there is a yes vote, that one of its major allies is breaking up? And can I ask, whether the Wales pledge would mean that an independent Scotland would have to agree to the 2% target if as a condition of entering NATO.
Well, I'll be consistent, as I've been throughout this campaign, that all questions for what a separated Scotland would have to do are effectively questions for Alex Salmond to answer. I don't think he's answered them effectively at all. Questions for what the United Kingdom will do, what the United Kingdom will look like, are questions for me, and I can answer all of them about how Scotland would fare inside our family of nations. So I think, you know, on NATO questions and all the rest of it, you've got to ask him, but I don't think it's total confusion about whether a separated Scotland would have a place in the European Union or in NATO, or what currency it would use, or all the rest of it. In terms of the last 2 weeks of this campaign, what I will be wanting to stress is just what a vital and important question this is. That, of course, it's a question for voters in Scotland to consider for their future. But I take a very clear, loud message from the rest of the United Kingdom, which is that we want you to stay. We care passionately about our family of nations. Of course, Scotland can make a different choice. The Scottish people are sovereign in this matter. But there shouldn't be any doubt that the rest of the United Kingdom passionately wants them to remain part of our successful family of nations. Obviously, at a NATO conference, it's a time when you reflect on the dangers in our world. And I don't think anyone can be in any doubt that we live in a very dangerous and insecure world. And I would have thought one of the strongest arguments that those of us who want to see the United Kingdom stay together can make is in that dangerous and insecure world with terrorist threats and other threats, isn't it better to be part of a United Kingdom that has a top 5 defence budget, that has some of the best security and intelligence services anywhere in the world, that is part of every single alliance that really matters in the world in terms of NATO, the G8, the G20, the European Union, a permanent member of the Security Council of the UN, to have all those networks and abilities to work with allies to keep us safe, isn't it better to have those things than to separate yourself from them? So those are some of the arguments we'll be making in the weeks to come before this vital vote. But let me stress again, it's a decision for the Scottish people. But I want them to know that as they make that choice, the rest of the United Kingdom cares passionately about our family of nations, wants them to stay. Can I thank you all very much for coming? I hope that you've enjoyed being in Wales as much as I have for this summit. I think that, let me say again, a big thank you to everyone at Celtic Manor, to the police, to our armed services, who I think have performed brilliantly, to everyone who's helped to make this a safe, secure and successful conference, but above all to the people of Wales who've given such a warm welcome to the world and I think have done the United Kingdom absolutely proud. Thank you.